Chapter 23. Ashton. I think it's time to go, Dakota. We've stayed out too long, and you've learned more than you need to know about tracking an animal and hunting with a bow and arrow. You've gotten good with a knife. But your survival skills need more work, but that's not a problem because that takes more time. As my mate, I can have you hunting like a werewolf in no time. Ronan winked and smiled at Dakota, placing a strand of hair behind her ear. Ronan took her hands and rubbed them together inside his large hand. You're cold. He brought her into his chest, where she snuggled against his hard muscles. Watching at the embers and hearing the crackling of wood, Dakota traced a finger along the center of Ronan's chest. His erection swelled from the arousal brought on by her warm touch. Dakota's opening quivered from his hard length against her thigh. Flames of passion burned inside the inner core of their bodies. It would not be long. Rising passion blasted through Ronan like the hot flames from a fire. Dakota eased back against him. Ronan didn't know how long he could take being so close to Dakota, yet far from her because of the gulf he knew existed because of Ashton. As she lay her head against Ronan's chest with him holding her around the waist, she surveyed the sky, remembering the last time she gazed at stars. It was at the home Ashton wanted to share with her. Captured by the flames dancing in the campfire, Dakota glanced up at Ronan. Can't we stay longer? The sky is perfect, and I like watching the stars. This is the only place where I can see them clearly without the clouds and fog hiding those beautiful bodies. I'm at peace here with you, she said, looking up into his dark amber eyes. I see a beautiful body that I can admire that's closer than any star. I can't reach a star, but I can reach and admire you. Dakota turned to face Ronan, and their eyes met, and their lips touched, and Ronan's tongue found its way through her soft lips and embraced her tongue in a swirl of heated pleasure. Ronan didn't know how long he could contain his hunger for Dakota, and her beautiful slim body that felt as if he could hold her in one hand and she would fit. But would his massive manhood fit inside her small body? He wondered. He never wanted to hurt her, and that's why he took his time with her, but time was running out. Soon my pack will return, and they will understand that you're equally as capable of being my mate as any of the war females. I need an answer before they return for the full moon celebrations. Will you give me an answer before then? The answer is yes. Dakota didn't hesitate. She looked over at Ronan and eased under his large arms to keep warm from the cool of the night. She liked looking up at the stars as he held her close to him. She folded her arms over his. He could feel his penis throbbing each time she lay close to him. It wasn't any use hiding it. She had to know how aroused he had become since they had been alone in the forest. Now that I agreed to marry you, can I at least have a tent when we're out hunting? You will have a house, and the hunting will be over for you. It will be time to mate and have pups. Dakota didn't think about that much until now. Until she faced the realization that she had agreed to a union that was different from marrying a human or even a vampire. The werewolves mate during the full moon, and then the females become pregnant immediately. Dakota had said yes without this knowledge, and there was no way she could take that back. After all, she chose Ronan over her vampire lover. Dakota's only thought was whether she would be happy in that role as the mate to a werewolf. Ronan appeared devoted to her. In the months she lived with him, she was under his protection, and no werewolf or were female risked questioning his actions. There were many nights he wanted to claim her. After all, she was in the bedroom next to his, and he couldn't help but hear and smell her fresh scented body. He imagined how he would take her the first night they would consummate the union. He wouldn't put her on all fours just yet, and fuck her from behind like he would a were female. She was a human and too delicate for that. But after she had become used to his cock and his body, then he would take her the way he found pleasing to himself. There must be some pleasure in being an alpha, and he didn't want to have to take another female to satisfy him in bed. Ronan, aware that the were females were against him marrying Dakota because they wanted him for themselves. They disliked her for more than one thing. She was human and she seemed different. Dakota appeared more obstinate than obedient. Dakota had freedom to choose a mate. They didn't have that luxury. The were females would pace about mumbling among each other, giving her looks that would kill, but never saying what they thought. She knew they didn't like that she was living with Ronan, and he hadn't tried to mate her. The were females resented her for having such control over the alpha when he could have done what he wanted to her, but he chose not to bend her over and fuck her from behind like he would have done one of them. Ronan was the alpha of the pack, and he could have mated with all the females and sent the werewolves to find other mates. But he wouldn't do that. He wanted to live as his father had with one human woman, and he chose Dakota. With their eyes closed and holding each other in a loving embrace, they woke to the birds screeching as if a predator was near. Ronan moved back from Dakota and jumped to his feet and sniffed the air. "What is it?" Dakota questioned as she rose to her feet holding Ronan's arm. "Stay near the fire. It's probably nothing. Maybe a young mountain lion lost. Remember what I taught you." And Ronan stalked off into the dark and into the high grass. Dakota watched until she didn't see him anymore. She felt uneasy as the fire appeared to die down. She needed to gather some wood for the fire, because she didn't know how long Ronan would be gone, and it wasn't good to be out in the wilderness without fire with all the predators who hunt at night. If the cold didn't get her, the stray animals would. And wolves were roaming about too. She hadn't planned on wandering too far from the campsite when she walked around gathering branches. Picking up stray twigs that had fallen from pine trees, she headed back to camp when she heard voices. Tiptoeing near the sound, she couldn't make out the words spoken, but one had to be Ronan and he was talking to someone. She couldn't see who it was either. It was too dark among the brush. She inched closer, but they were still too far away for her to see or hear what they were saying. "It's been almost 6 months, and now you come for Dakota." "She's mine," Ronan said as if he had found a gold mine that no one had laid claims to. "You will never have her. She was mine first." "Did she tell you about our relationship?" Ashton countered. "Yes, she did. She told me everything. And you told me the rest?" Ashton raised an eyebrow. "How could you treat her that way?" "I forgot that an animal can't tell the difference between what is good and precious. All an animal knows is that when he wants something, nothing will stand in his way until he gets it." "Are you speaking of yourself, dog? You know she doesn't love you, and yet you're willing to force yourself on her. Have you mated with her?" Ashton didn't really want an answer. None would please him now. "If I had, there would be no reason for you to come here. She would be pregnant with my pups by now, and maybe this would have been her second set if I had been an animal like you. But then maybe you're sterile. That's why your kind has to hunt around for children who will eventually become a fiend like yourself," Ronan said, gauging Ashton's reaction as he goaded him to anger. Ashton's eyes turned dark blue and his handsome face twisted with rage. His mouth curved downward. His eyebrow raised and his fingers tightened into a fist. But he calmed himself. He knew the truth, and Ronan was telling him some truth. His eyes flicked upward. "She wants me, not you," Ashton snarled out his words into the night air. "Then why is she here with me? She could have left me, but she didn't? Did she agree to marry you?" "You will have to ask her." Ashton's blue eyes turned black and his forehead creased, then at the blink of Ronan's eyes, Ashton stood facing him. Ronan didn't have time to shift. It was a face-off until it wasn't. "You don't scare me, dead one. I kill vampires like you for sport," Ronan said, pushing all Ashton's buttons until he found the right one. "No doubt you've killed little children, dog." As these words fell from Ashton's mouth with a quick flash, Ashton reached for Ronan's neck, and his long incisors extended below his bottom lip. "Stop. Don't do it, Morgan." With Ashton's back to Dakota, she dropped the branches and griped one large pine branch in her hand, leaning into his back with all her strength and she plunging the large branch into Ashton's back. Hammering her fist on the thick stick until she couldn't feel it anymore, and until it disappeared into the vampire's body. It had pierced his back to his chest and through his clothing, extending out in the front. Ashton turned to see Dakota, his eyes wide, and his incisors receding as he stared at the one who placed a stake into his heart. He looked at Dakota at first with his mouth dripping with venom, and with his menacing dark eyes. His eyes changed, and now tears fell down his pale handsome face. The face that Dakota loved. The face she dreamed of at night, and the face she destroyed. In the time Dakota impaled Ashton and looked and screamed, Ronan shifted, and his massive paw reached out, tearing across Ashton's back. Ashton fell like a tall tower to the ground. The sound of his body falling had made a tremendous noise. The sound of Dakota's crying was louder. Dakota shouted, "No. I thought it was Morgan. I didn't know it was you, Ashton. I love you. I would never hurt you. Forgive me. Forgive me, Ashton." She sank to the earth near him, holding his head in her lap, bending to kiss him and rocking back and forth, mumbling something not even Ronan's sharp ears detected. She looked up at Ronan with sad, silent, tearful eyes. The end of Book 2. Book 3 coming soon. An alpha werewolf whose only desire is to mate with Dakota, a human, and he will defy his pack and hordes of vampires to claim Dakota during the full moon. A vampire who's in love with Dakota, but can't abandon the sins of his past. A vampire who wants to conquer everyone and everything he comes in contact with, especially that which belongs to his brother Ashton. Dakota, the human in this triangle, who's trying to find her way to forgive her immortal vampire lover Ashton. Will she discover that Ashton has turned away from her and from his humanity and wants her only to satisfy his lust? How many times will Dakota have to put a stake into Ashton's heart before she can be free of him? Will the werewolf fall deeply in love with Dakota, where he becomes blind to her love for a vampire? Will the werewolf survive the love triangle? You can read the final book in this scorching romantic vampire series to discover who will live through these twisted love affairs. If you haven't read I Am the Night, I've included chapters 1 and 2. Enjoy.